when we compiled the cash withdrawals over a period of time, precisely from 2015 till date, we discovered that state governments have withdrawn over 701 billion in cash, with some states withdrawing up to 24 billion naira. And then we also discovered that the federal government withdrew in cash up to 225 billion, while the local governments withdrew up to 156 billion. So if we are to apply the law here, all the public servants involved in these withdrawals are entitled to 3 years imprisonment. That's what the law said. Now, it became necessary for us to direct and order the financial institutions to stop completely cash withdrawal from public accounts. We have issued an advisory to all the governors and all the local government chairmen and all the MDs in the federal government we give them between now and 1st of March 2023 to put all facilities in place to operationalize the guidelines. So what is the bottom line? Is that on the 1st of March, if there is cash withdrawal from a government account of even if it is 1 naira, we are going to trigger off money laundering and corruption investigation anywhere at all. Even if there are special needs to withdraw cash from any public account anywhere, that will have to get a presidential approval.
All right, welcome back. That is what we'll be talking about today on the program. Mr. Jibrin Okutapa joins us here. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for coming on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
Well, this is already generating several reactions now. This directive that statement by the NFIU saying by the 1st of March, no cash withdrawal whatsoever at the federal and state level. So if anyone violates it, they say they're going to trigger investigations and ensure that money laundering offenses will be perhaps pursued against those persons. And while some disagree, others think, well, I'm not too sure about some of these things. So from the point of law, what do you think of this?
Well, first and foremost, I think that Nigeria must develop some level of shock absorber to absorb some of the fine policies of government. We mustn't always be at cross purposes with our government. Now, the NIFU is a creation of an act of parliament, okay. Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit. Mm-hmm. It's an act, it was created by an act of parliament. And if you look at the act of 2018 that set up or created this agency, it vests it with wide power to do. And it has to do with something that enforcing, one of which function is enforcement of the provisions of Money Laundering Act. Now, I was reading somewhere, and I was amazed to see that between 2015 and now, over 701 trillion naira was said to have been withdrawn in cash from our bank. Now, when you look at all of these things and vis-a-vis the kind of ostentatious lifestyle that we display, particularly the public officers who hold public office in public trust for Nigerian people, one then begins to wonder, where did they generate this money from? And how are they spending this money? If you go for a wedding or some social functions or even political rallies, you will notice that because of the degree of poverty level in Nigeria, a political juggernaut will be flowing money and throwing it at Nigerians who will be picking the crumble that falls from the, the convoy of these political people.
We cannot say it is the monies they withdrew from there.
Well, no one mints money. And so no one goes to Nigerian Printing and Publishing Minting Company and say, print naira for me. This money, if you do a job, you have to be paid. Now, you may be paid in cash. And mark you, under the Money Laundering Prohibition Act, there are certain amount of treasury holds that you cannot withdraw.
Yeah.
You cannot hold.
But about that one, that earlier point you made, Mr. Kutakpa, the thing is, the way corporations function is, even if you withdraw several or huge amounts of money, what they usually will do is they will ask you, all right, account for that money.
Yes.
Come up with the documents and the receipts. Is that not a failure of those agencies to properly track all of those things? In the first instance.
In the first instance, I agree with you that there are complete failure of institutions in Nigeria. In fact, the banking industry that we operate in Nigeria appears to be in contradistinction with what happened all over the world. If you go to your bank, for instance, to say, give me information about accounts that was open, say, in 2000, you may have difficulties in retrieving information because we are very careless about information management in this country. So back to this Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, let's not lose sight of why we are here. I support their position and enforcement of the provisions of the Act that set them up in order to prevent money laundering. Two, we are getting into election. And in this election year, INEC and the rest have been crying, and the rest Nigerians have also been talking that vote buying had become the order of the day in Nigeria electoral system. I agree that no government official should be allowed, including governors, ministers, presidential aides, even the president himself, should not be allowed to withdraw humongous amount of money.
You think this is targeted to for elections?
Well, it may not be targeted to, but it's not too far from it.
But if it were, presidential election and that of Senate and the likes, it's February. They say this is on the 1st of March. So they would have finished the first part of the elections and then on to the next before this takes effect.
Well, I agree. But from March, we still have political activities. Mark you that Nigerian election system does not end only with the election. There is a pre, post, during, and post-election. Now, after elections have been conducted, you are aware that some persons who are hoping to become something may engage practitioners, legal practitioners, consultants, with the hope that their mandate, in quote, or whatever, be defended and they pay from government coffers. I believe that if this policy is religiously enforced, we will be able to find out why, in most cases, humongous amount of money are withdrawn from government treasuries, and you see nothing or little that government has done with that money. For instance, you talk about this thing you call about security votes. There are a lot of money being withdrawn under the guise of security votes, and yet we are in a state of nature where life has become so brutish, shortish, and nasty, and people are afraid to even go to their villages.
So this will also mean that all funds, including the so-called security votes, cannot be withdrawn in cash anymore.
That's what it means, unless and until there is proven evidence that the president approves that you withdraw the money. And my fear about this policy is not the intention, it's the ability to follow through. Can the NFIU follow through? Does he have the lever to do it?
So from the point of law, you think they are in order?
For a point of law,
states as well.
Point of law, looking at the provisions of the law that set up the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Units, particularly look at Section 1 that set up the aim and objectives of that unit. Look at Section 2 that created the Act, and look at Section 3 also that set out the functions that this agency needs to do. See, Chamberlain, Nigeria is the only country where we don't trust our government agencies. And the reason is very simple. Because we don't have that element that the other advanced countries have, that they are patriotic and nationalistic. You can't go to UK, for instance, and see government ministers or government functionaries withdrawing pound sterling and go to political rally. In fact, when I went to UK at a point in time, and I was buying something, and I was bringing out 100 pounds instead of lesser, either 10 pounds, 5 pounds, or 50 pounds. The people collecting that 100 pounds from me were going in and out to come to find out who is this one that is bringing this kind of money. So, and then I asked my sister-in-law, what is going on here? She said, no, this is a cashless society where you don't spend money like that. So I now had to explain to them, well, before I came in, I declared this money at the airport because I didn't have an account domiciled in the United Kingdom. And so I have to buy something cash. They said, okay, that's right, that's right. They subjected me to some thorough, but not here. Here, if I just succeeded in withdrawing huge amount of money of government from Treasury today, and I go somewhere like in Wuse Market, and I start distributing it and flagging it here and there, Nigerians will be happy to pick it because there is a general belief that all of us are thieves.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Paul Ananaba. He joins us virtually today. Good morning, Dr. Ananaba. Thank you for joining us on the program. Well, what is your position on this matter? That the NFIU has said that from the 1st of March, it will be illegal for any cash withdrawal, cash transaction from any public accounts. Violation of that will trigger the anti-corruption agencies, to level money laundering charges or cases against any state official or public servant who embarks on such.
Right. Let me start by greeting my friend J.S. and then position here, probably I agree, but I think that.
Oh, you're coming in broken. We can actually make out what exactly the point is. So we'll try that connection again so that we can get your sound correct. But in the meantime, let me bring in my colleagues in Lagos. They may have a question for you, Mr. Okuchekwa. Go ahead, guys.
Let me begin, Mr. Okuchekwa, by asking, from the benefit of hindsight, you began by saying, well, part of what you said earlier was that you have doubts about government following through. And you also expressed a reason why it seems Nigerians don't generally have complete trust in government or government officials. Now, going by some of the things that the chief executive of NFIU said, that if they were to implement the law to the letter, the public officials who were involved in these withdrawals prior to now, they deserve 3-year jail terms each. The question then, in your opinion, sir, is why is that law not implemented so that there will be some measure of deterrence? Because 1 trillion naira from public accounts in cash, possibly not fully accounted for, is no small token.
Well, I cannot hazard a guess why they had not been able to implement and enforce that law up to now. but it is better late than never. For me, let them enforce the provisions of the law. The Money Laundering Prohibition Act is there. The Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit Act is there. They don't think I don't think they have the power to criminalize the withdrawal, but they have the power to investigate and refer them to relevant government agencies for purposes of prosecution. Because under the Money Laundering Act, for instance, Money Laundering and Prohibition Act, for instance, you can't withdraw more than a certain amount of money from the bank. And all transactions have to go through financial institutions. If you look at sometimes many of the cases that are in court at the instance and behest of EFCC have to do with the humongous amount of money that were being withdrawn and were withdrawn, rather, from our banks, including our own Central Bank of Nigeria, that did not follow through the laid down regulations. And like I keep saying consistently, our problem in this country is not the absence of law. There are laws that will have made this country a very safe haven for anyone to come in and transact business and go. But it is the capacity, ability to enforce the law and visit the violators of this law with sanctions that is the bane of this country. So for me, I will support any law that anybody or any person or group of persons that will enforce our law that will bring sanity to this country. Well, because the absence of sanity in Nigeria is traceable and is a function of non-enforcement of our laws, well, which provisions are there for anyone to see.
Yeah, while that is valid, and I mean, I understand what you're saying, but you know, the question then arises as to why not enforce the laws? I believe that at least every state in Nigeria and every local government has a legal department. The states, for instance, have the attorneys general and the commissioners for justice. They know all of these laws. They know the things that should be done and should not be done. Wouldn't you say that these officials of government are aware of the law and consequently culpable for the government's breaking the law willy-nilly?
Majority are aware, or all of them are aware, but we seem to have this thing in our DNA that you can do anything and go away with it. Otherwise, why, for instance, will somebody go to the Central Bank of Nigeria with a written note and get money from that bank? Why should anybody go to the bank and withdraw government money and is not held accountable for it? So we are suffering from what I may refer to as absence of nationalism and patriotism. Everyone is to himself. No one believes that Nigerian society should function properly for the maximum benefit of the rest of Nigerian people. That is why, for instance, acquisition of political power is a means of production in Nigeria. Once you are poor and you get to government, you can do anything and get away with it. So I think that, yes, the government, they are aware. This political class, the civil servant, they are aware. Government should do more and be seen to be do the thing rightly and avoid political persecution. Let it not be selective prosecution. Let it not be selective investigation. And I will appeal to Mr. President that in giving approval, it should not be seen to be a partisan president that gives approval to his political party's members.
Well, Mr. Kutakwa, we'll come to that proviso shortly. Just a second. We'll come back to that proviso, shortly. But there's a caution you raised earlier when you said you have questions about whether or not the NFIU and its partners, the EFCC, ICPC, and the rest of them, will be able to follow through with this provision, this policy that they have come up with. But it's expected that the institutions at the state level should be able to support this policy. Do you see that happening? And if you see it happening, whether or not you see it happening, what should be the role of the attorneys general and commissioners of justice and all legal practitioners within the confines of each of these state governments and local governments over time? Because unless the structures in the states themselves are strong enough to absorb this policy, it's going to go in the way of others, just as you've said.
The EFCC Act, the ICPC Act, and other laws seems to have vested the investigations of crime in the financial crime and corruption cases in the Economic and Financial Crime Commission. So for me, the cooperation of the states and state officials and government officials may be difficult to get because of the selfish, partisan, and primordial consideration. Because a lot of people in the states want money to grab power. A lot of them need money to retain power. And so I will suggest that the EFCC that have been shadowed with the responsibility and this Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit that have been given the responsibility of seeing that we prevent money laundering, terrorism, financing, and so on and so forth, be allowed unhindered and unfettered right to do their job. So as for the Attorney General, I do not know whether indeed some of them are indeed Attorney General, because it appears to me that the moment some of our colleagues accept to become Attorney General of either the states or sometimes even of the Federation, their independence of legal minds to do and to advise what is right appears to disappear from their subconsciousness. And so it appears to me that the governors, the appointers of the Attorney General are almighty within the Nigerian context.
All right.
So we can't strictly blame them for this. Right. Some will not want to leave.
I wonder. Let me bring in Dr. Ananaba. I think we should be able to hear him now. Dr. Ananaba, I hope you can hear us at the moment. So could you go ahead and give us your perspective in terms of what the point you were going to make about this?
The point I was going to make is, let me even go back to history. Right from when I was in primary school, I had heard governments led by most of the people who are leading now tell us that Health for All, 1990, House for All, 1990. We are past 1990. We moved on to 2000. We moved on to 2010. And we moved on to 2020. We are in 2023. The rest is history. So when we talk about good faith, about governance, every Nigerian of adult age should know. The point I'm making is, let us...
Just a minute, Dr. Anaba. Could you turn down the volume of your set? It's howling back at us.
Okay. The point I am making is that we cannot base things in this country based on good faith. There is no degree of measurement. If you look at the NFIU Act, it does not give them powers to make the type of orders they are making. That is my view. There may be good reasons for trying to curb the way cash has been withdrawn in the country. But till today, I don't know how many people they can point out to say, yes, we have apprehended these people and we have prosecuted them. So let's not run on sentiment. I don't think that NFIU has the powers to stop a state government from withdrawing cash. That too, even if the act says so, it will be running against the Constitution.
All right.
The Constitution has...
Just give us a moment. We need to go on a quick break. Just hold the line. We'll come back and get you to conclude your thoughts on this matter. We will be right back. All right, welcome back. Dr. Porter and about go ahead, because you were saying that they do not have the powers under the NFIU Act to do what they're doing. So quite a number of things. So they have made that announcement, and then they say they will activate the anti-corruption agencies, both the EFCC, the ICPC, to investigate. So they will be working with those agencies. So what part of what they've done is it that they don't have any right to do from the point of law, from your perspective?
The point I'm making is you can see them begin to come to reality when they said they will now have to work with the other agencies. Starting alone, NFIU ought not to have made that statement. It could have been possibly a joint statement. But beyond that, you want to go cashless. Does NFIU have the capacity, or can they guarantee that Nigeria, that the financial system will guarantee a cashless, total cashless society by March 1? Now, I would have expected that CBN and other financial institutions will be part of a coalition that will bring this to pass. Now, any of these acts, EFCC, ICPC, or NFIU Act, not have a constitution. The constitution functions for states and for local governments. The constitution is bigger and higher than any other law as a growing law. So, on what basis will NFIU give directive to states? That's the point. It's not the sentiment of, they mean well, so let's go. When things go wrong from that road, how do we address them? So I think that
if I understand your point, are you saying that
within the law?
Okay, just a minute, Dr. Nanaba. Does it mean then that the non-functional nature or the poor connection capacity questions of the cashless platforms, so does that then invalidate the point that NFIU is making, that, or the law, that they say you cannot carry out those transactions? Is that your point here, that the non-functioning of that platform invalidates that point, that law?
Say, the Messiah, they've come to help to curb this excess cash and all that, cash in wrong hands. I say, well, that's my response to that. My major response is that the act setting them up, they cannot go outside the law setting them up. I have read that law, that act like 2018. It doesn't give them powers to regulate cash withdrawal up to states. And I've also asked you, if they are saying, yes, over $1 trillion has been withdrawn by cash and all that, who have they prosecuted all this while? Do you need to make an announcement after the act 2018 till now for you to say, to show that people have contravened this legislation? So why is it coming at a time in 2023, when immediately after presidential elections. March 1 will be immediately after presidential elections, when the other elections are still ongoing. Why is it coming in a year? Also, we're having a census. Why is it coming from NFIU and without a coalition of other? So you look at it from the practicality point. You look at it from the legal point.
So is your point such that if NFIU had held a joint press conference with probably the EFCC or the ICPC, or if they are working with those agencies, they will then have a legal cover, or at least it will be legitimate for them to do that?
But not up to the states. You see, NFIU is coming from the Federal Republic, from the Federation. The Section 4, 5, and 6 of the Constitution are there. The National Assembly makes law for the Federation. If you look at the Supreme Court decision in Attorney General of Bender State and Attorney General of the Federation, it was a 1981 decision of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, once money has left the Federation account and has been shared among the states, the federal government has no powers to regulate the money of the states. I'm not encouraging rascality by governors and misusing funds for that. If that had happened, I expected NFIU to give facts and figures and say, this state did this, this one did this, this one did this. And once the governors are believing, they will apprehend them and prosecute them.
Yeah, but isn't it the same principle?
To prosecute, they have to analyze, they have to collect information, they have to assess, not to be issuing orders, so in my mind.
So isn't it the same principle that, for instance, the EFCC uses to investigate governors and public accounts at the state level, and then when the directive comes through from federal agency, like such as the CBN, all states, individuals, everybody complies with that? Is that not in the same breath that they do that?
EFCC has been acting within the law. They investigate. EFCC has never come up to say, to give directives to states and local governments. That's what my point has always been. They can investigate states. They can make statements that are not directory to say, we are investigating states that withdraw, that contravene the Money Laundering Act.
All right.
They have such powers. But they do not have power to say, from this point, you cannot do this. They don't regulate monetary policy in this country. I don't think, there's also the CBN Act and all that. So that's why I was saying, if it was a coalition, we could find some explanations. But as it is, their act does not allow, the land act setting them up does not empower them to do, to issue orders. I think they should review.
All right, Mr. Nanaba, I know that you need to catch.
I see the need to intervene by NFIU, but they should not. Because if we say NFIU, fine. What if we will be setting a precedent for other agencies to also issue orders just because they think they were doing well?
Okay, I know that you need to run. If not, I would have loved you could get your friend here, Mr. Kutakwa, to get his perspective in. And my colleagues ask questions of you, but we understand that you need to run. We do thank you very much indeed for your time and perspective, Dr. Paul Ananaba, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, this morning.
Thank you.
All right. So, safe flight.
You heard him there.
I heard him. He's my friend and my callmate, so we know ourselves very well. But with profound respect to my friend, Professor Ananaba, bringing question of constitution in this matter is likely to confuse the issue. Now, I did not see what the NFIU had done as a sort of directives. I see it as information that because government has what they call cashless policy, that from March, no government officials will be allowed to withdraw cash from government accounts. We must make that point very clear. Nobody is stopping transaction, but for purposes of accountability,
we are stopping the mode of transaction.
We are stopping the mode of transaction. The mode of transaction that used to be that you go to Bank A, you want 1 billion naira, and then the bank manager run helter-skelter and give it to you, you go away with it. We are stopping it. And if you check the act setting up the agency, look at the order, it's supposed to be an agency that create a level playing field ground, avoidance of money laundering, avoidance of terrorism financing, analyzing and giving information about all of these financial misappropriation and delinquencies.
Yeah, but Mr. Kutekba, you know, in spite of all of
before that, my learned friend was talking about constitution. Now, let me be very clear that banking and financing is on exclusive legislative lists. So no state government or no local government has legislative competence to legislate on banking and finance. Only the federal government.
So where comes the federating units function?
That's another cup of tea. But as of today, that is a law. And so the only competent authority that regulates inflow, financial institution, money and all of that is the federal government.
So why don't we have states, local government, federal accounts?
That is why we also have been spending humongous amount of money to amend our constitution. As of today, speaking for myself, Nigeria is operating a unitary federal system where all powers are concentrated at the center. And we are the reason why the other time an elder statesman, an erudite professor and a scholar of note, Professor Nwabueze, was regretting that their thought in having this type of constitution was that things were going to be done well. Today, you see that all powers are concentrated at the center. And the local government, the state government, and what have you, comes to Abuja for handout.
All right.
So
my colleagues
that is our law.
All right, let's get my colleagues in. They've got questions for you. Go ahead, guys.
All right, Mr. Kutekba, I'd like us to now look at the proviso. The DG NFIU also added that henceforth, all withdrawals will now have to secure the approval of the president. So in that regard, do you anticipate, bureaucracy, setting in at that point? Imagine, there's a contingency requirement for some funds, and you have to get the approval of the president. How many approvals can the president actually sign in a day or in a week?
Honestly, I do not know how the president will cope with it. Apart from bureaucracy, it becomes another weapon for political corruption, with respect. Because before you can see Mr. President, it's like a camel going through the eye of the needle. And so if you have a need for amount of money that needs to be paid in cash, then how do you get Mr. President? How does a man, for instance, who lives somewhere far away from Abuja, there's no good road, need to bring, how are they going to cope with it? That's a disadvantage that I see. Another disadvantage that my learned friend pointed out, which I agree with completely, is that are we sufficiently matured in terms of technology for cashless policy? Going to villages, my old grandparents and mothers in the village, if they were alive, how do we have banks in my village and the villages of most of us who are in town? Do we even have the internet facilities, even within the banking system in Abuja, for instance, and some other cities? Each time you go to your bank, you are told that the network is down. How has the government set up the facilities to meet these exigencies. Because in other climes that we're trying to copy from, their internets work 247. The facilities are superb, and there is no power outage. For instance, are we going to buy solars and fix in the villages? How many banks do we have in our remote villages? Are we being told that the market men and women in those villages are not going to transact banking system? They are not going to use money to do businesses. So these are advantages that I see. But on the basis of whether or not the intention is correct, I will support it. But the disadvantages with respect outweigh the advantages we are seeking to gain. Now, if we are limiting
your
it to
your learned colleague
politicians,
also asked a very
it will
critical...
be guru for me.
Yeah,
and I will support it.
Mr.
Because
Kutekpa,
no market man or woman in the village go to government treasury to withdraw money.
Your learned colleague also asked a very critical question. He said, why is it coming after the election, now the date that it will become effective from? Speaking of which, I'd like you to look at it, critically at this point. Where does it now, I'm losing my train of thought now, pardon me. If the goal is to tackle corruption, yes, if the goal is to tackle corruption, you rightly noted that, it's going to check withdrawals of, security vote and all of that. Aren't we fishing in wrong waters, Mr. Kutekpa, if the goal is to tackle corruption? Because, some of the biggest corruption cases have been done without necessarily cash withdrawals, but with the pen.
You see, my problem with us in Nigeria is that there is nothing you do that either the timing or the way it is being done will not be subjected to various interpretations. And the reason is very simple, because we are each suspicious of one another. The motive may be right, the intention may be right, but there may be bad motive towards it. So when is it right to commence the enforcement of the provisions of the law? Is it not better late than not done at all? For me, I have no problem as to when is to commence and how it's being commenced. But are we genuinely committed to enforcing it? That's the fundamental we need to do. Have we suddenly become born again that will change our attitude and our orientation, and we are not going to be selective? For instance, even about the presidential approval, who will get express passage to the president for president to approve? Will it not assume a political coloration? Are we not going to look at it now from the point of view, or either from the north, south, east, and west? Because these have been our bane. So it is because we seem to be divided on primordial ethnic lines and partisanship and selfish interests, not the interests of Federal Republic of Nigeria, that most of these inquisitions are being done by Nigerians with objective minds. So for me, he is right to raise the question, why is it coming now? But when should it come? He reeled out so many things that government has said held for all by 2000. And in 2023, we still have, in the word of President Muhammad Buhari, our hospitals are still a mere consulting clinics. So we don't have facilities to attend to people. Just on Christmas Day, for instance, a lawyer was gunned down in broad daylight by a policeman. She was taken to about 3 or so hospitals. Facilities were not there to resuscitate her. She gave up. So when all these are reasons why Nigerians are questioning even the intention and motive of government.
So
and
if
government
that is
needs
the
to
case,
demonstrate
then,
absolute commitment
if that is the case, then,
loyalty to Nigerian people by being committed and doing what they need to do.
If that is the case, then, if you note that there's no right time, the DG of the NFIU also said that if the guidelines, as it is now, is implemented, any public official that withdraws risk a jail term of, 3 years. Why can't it be activated now? Why give the leeway, you know, for the act that will be tantamount to a crime? Why give a leeway for it to be committed?
Well, time does not run against the state. As far as I'm concerned, what I think the DG of Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit had done is to give information that we are going to be serious from 1st of March, which to me also shows that hitherto they were not serious with respect to them to enforce the provisions of the law, because the law has always been there. The public officers have the civil service rules or public service rules about financial regulations and financial transactions. In those days when we have civil servants that are nationalistic and patriotic, you don't go withdrawing money of government from public treasury without first of all raising a voucher. This voucher will be cross-checked. Other public officials will monitor it. So you don't just wake up and say, pick a pen and address a note to the governor of Central Bank and say, please let me have so and so amount of money in dollars and in pound sterling and in forex. No. And even the person to whom that letter is addressed to, who had the duty and responsibility not to honor it. But in Nigeria of today, the moment you and I suddenly find ourselves as president of Nigeria, as governors, or even local government chairman, we become demigod, and people now worship us rather than owing allegiance to the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, until our allegiance is to the Federal Republic of Nigeria and Nigerian Constitution, and not the occupant of the office. So we'll continue to sing the songs of failure that we see. Even this one, with respect, I do not see them push it through. We are just being gathered here today for purposes of debating the merit of the arguments.
So
the
from
same
the point,
set of human beings.
So from the point
tomorrow,
of the Constitution,
violate even their own guidelines with impunity, and who is policing the police?
So from the point of the Constitution, Mr.
Why do you think that the agencies, all these anti-corruption agencies, have not prosecuted any bank? These banks, they get huge profits.
Indeed, Shambali, that is the question. I asked the question. Indeed, some of these banks are, with all respect, are violating Nigerian law with such impunity and audacity of arrogance that if I were to be in a position of authority, their banking license would have been withdrawn by now. But even when there are court orders, some of these banks, with respect, circumvent them in favor of money bags to bring down the economy of this country or to undermine the authority of Nigerian courts. Indeed, in other clime, the mere fact that a process is filed makes the citizen to respect the institution of court. But today, virtually everyone appear not to respect the institution of court. So some of these banking institutions need to be thoroughly, because the problem of Nigeria, if you ask me about corruption, are Nigerian banks, with respect, because they do things that they ought not to do. And the central bank should be up and doing, because the Central Bank of Nigeria has the power, the authority, and regulatory capacity to ensure that there is financial probity, financial accountability within the banking sector. But today, a lot of very serious, I don't want to use the word operating in my mind, but I can't resist it. The kind of corruption going on in our banking industry is so humongous and so mind-boggling that it will take a man that is resolutely committed, patriotically, nationalistically, to tackle it, because heads need to roll. Unless head rolls, Nigerian people will suffer. Accounts are open without even knowing who brings the money. They are interested in having money for purposes of profit, to the detriment of economic development of Nigeria. For me, finally, before you say, I don't think that we are operating banking institution in Nigeria. What we operate are deposit house where you keep money and then to get it back legitimately, except through other means, you have challenges.
We thank you for coming on, Mr. Jibrin Okutekpa. But the questions for the authorities there, why is this coming after the presidential elections? Is what's good for the goose, not good for the gander? So what is happening to banks who have been found culpable? Are they, or is the law now a respecter of institutions and persons, as it were? So food for thought. We will be back in just a moment. Incidentally, we'll be talking about a similar matter. It's a financial matter too, so stay with us.